Welcome back, it's part 3 of the films of Paul W. Anderson. With the success of Mortal Kombat, Anderson found himself in the position of being able to choose his next project. He wanted to make a movie with Kurt Russell next, one of his idols, but Russell was unavailable at the time, and so Anderson had to make another movie in the meanwhile. Eventually, Paramount offered him a script by Philip Eisner called Event Horizon. Anderson liked the idea of the film, which was essentially like a haunted house movie in space, and set out to direct this motion picture. Probably the most interesting story I've heard from Anderson's career at this point was the fact that he was actually offered the opportunity to direct X-Men.
Probably it wasn't a good career choice, but I turned down X-Men after Mortal Kombat to do this, because I just didn't want to do another PG-13 movie.
Event Horizon is a strange film in Anderson's filmography. On one hand, it's highly regarded by Anderson's fans, and some even go so far as to say it's his best film. Others, however, hate the movie and have accused Anderson of ripping off the story from Disney's The Black Hole and from the 1972 sci-fi cult film Solaris. Anderson himself admits that Event Horizon and Solaris share a lot of similarities, but according to him, Eisner flat out denies having seen the movie at all. Some of the plagiarism claims can be accounted for by the fact that Anderson used the movie as a way of paying homage to some of his favorite horror films like The Haunting and The Shining. And I think it's pretty fucking unfair that whenever Quentin Tarantino pays homage to his favorite films, nobody ever accuses him of plagiarism. And if you ask me, Event Horizon is Anderson's best horror movie.
I definitely had something kind of dark and scary in my psyche to get out. You can say that again.
The film's plot has to do with the Event Horizon, a spaceship which can travel vast distances by opening black holes. However, during the original mission, the ship and its crew become lost. The ship shows up inexplicably just off Neptune, and a recovery mission is carried out, with the ship's designer Dr. Weir accompanying Captain Miller and his crew on their spaceship, the Lewis and Clark. Weir is played by Sam Neill and is haunted by the memory of his wife's suicide, and starts to have weird dreams and creepy visions of her. The crew of the Lewis and Clark is not excited about the recovery mission since it's the farthest a rescue mission has been attempted, and there's a high probability that they won't come back alive. This is one of the interesting aspects of the film. Though it's sci-fi, they take the physics seriously, and the film attempts to make a fairly realistic portrayal of space travel. They can't just zoom to the other end of the solar system, and the journey itself takes several days, and if there's a fuck-up, they're basically on their own. I have to point out that the hypersleep pods that the crew use during their journey are obviously inspired by the Nostromo in Alien, another favorite movie of Anderson. So the crew finds the Event Horizon with its life support system shut off and the mutilated corpse of one of the crewmen floating around. One of the crewmen finds the ship's generator and is pulled into a portal which suddenly opens up. There's a powerful pulse shot out from the back of the ship which damages the Lewis and Clark and strands the crew on the Event Horizon. As the engineer tries to fix the ship, the rest of the crew try to figure out what happened to the Event crew and what caused the accident. And this is when the gory shit hits the fan. It's hard to talk about the movie without giving away spoilers, so my apologies ahead of time. Lawrence Fishburne plays Captain Miller, the mission commander. He and Weir don't see eye to eye, and he's more concerned about getting his group back to Earth alive than saving the Event Horizon. He's haunted by visions of a former crewmate who burned alive when he had to leave him behind on a prior recovery mission. This crewman is referred to as the Burning Man and is probably one of the more gruesome things in the movie. As always, Fishburne is excellent and pulls off the role with class. Jason Isaacs is back as the ship's medic, DJ Trauma, probably the worst name for a character in a Paul Anderson film. The role is a step up from his brief appearance in Shopping. He's got a lot more screen time and some pretty chilling dialogue. He tries to decode a recorded message sent from the Event Horizon which he believes to be Latin liberate me, meaning save me. Later he discovers that the message says something else and it's not pretty. He has probably the most gruesome death in the entire film, so just a heads up. Jolie Richardson plays Lieutenant Stark, the first officer. She doesn't have much in the way of a personality other than her playful relationship with Cooper, played by Richard T. Jones. However, she's the first one to suspect that the ship itself might be alive and causing the crew to have hallucinations. Miller doesn't believe her at first, but once Weir rips his own eyes out and goes crazy, she becomes one of the more stronger characters in the film. Sean Pertwee is also back and plays Smith, the ship's engineer. His role is quite different from the Shopping and is more of a supporting character this time, but very endearing and likable. However, I do have to question whether an engineer would wear that much mascara. Jack Noseworthy plays Justin, or if you will, the Rookie. He has the oddest nickname in the movie, Baby Bear. Justin is the guy who ends up in the portal and for a while is catatonic, until he starts talking about the horrors he's seen. Peters is the medical officer and haunted by visions of her wheelchair-bound son. Cooper is the final crew member, and unfortunately the best way I can describe him is as the token black guy. Seriously, he doesn't seem to serve any purpose apart helping Smith fix the ship. However, he's also probably one of my favorite characters since he's got some of the most funniest lines in the whole movie. What the film does really well is play up the element of dread and that anything can happen. You don't really know if all the characters are hallucinating or not until shit hits the fan and all hell breaks loose. Literally. I also love the design of the Event Horizon, which Anderson intentionally had modeled based on the architecture of the Notre Dame Cathedral. The latter half of the film is quite gory in places, but not to the point where it would be excessive. In fact, that's the reason I think the movie works so well. The first half is spent setting up the story and the characters, and the horror is still mostly hidden. It's not until the latter half that the film starts to get really grotesque, and even then the film doesn't lose the intense atmosphere, which is quite admirable. However, the movie wasn't a massive box office hit. It wasn't a flop either, but not successful to the degree that Anderson had hoped. Not that surprising for a horror movie, but this shined rather poorly on the film due to the fact that it was quite an expensive production. The film was produced by Paramount, it was shot in England at Pinewood Studios, and Anderson had to keep traveling back and forth between UK and the States to oversee the entire production. In the long run, Anderson stretched his production schedule too thin. The film began production in mid-1996 and had a release date in the fall of 1997, which Anderson was contract-bound to meet. Unfortunately, this meant that he didn't have as much time to work on the film's post-production as he wanted to. He submitted a full-length cut of the unfinished film, which had a lot more gore in it than the finished movie. This cut got a bad reaction, and Paramount had the film's length cut down severely, removing the most gory bits and winding up with the film's current runtime of around 90 minutes. That's a funny thing about Anderson's movies I feel a need to mention. Almost all of his movies are only 90 minutes long. That's one reason I really like them, because you can watch them without having to reserve a big chunk of your day. So many movies these days are over 2 hours long and pretend like they have something important to say, but Anderson doesn't do that. However, he has often said that he wasn't happy with the final cut of the movie and would have wanted to have had time to make a cut that would have restored some of the gorier aspects of the film. Either way, the film is still excellent, which is why I don't personally mind even if it's not Anderson's ideal version of the film. The cast all do a great job and the atmosphere works great. The visual effects are also really good, and you wouldn't really think that the movie was being put together in a hurry. However, if the film does have some weakness, it's probably the ending. It feels like a bit of a cop-out and is pretty inconclusive, as well as it relies on a rather old horror movie cliché. Don't get me wrong, Anderson has put open endings in a lot of his movies, but Event Horizons didn't really work for me. However, everything else about the film is great, and it certainly is one of my favorites, and absolutely worth a watch. My grade for it is a 4.5 out of 5. Come back next time when we'll see exactly where Anderson's career took a bit of a nosedive.